Welcome to another episode of Roll or Die. Today's guest comes to us as a recommendation from one of our listeners. So anybody out there that has suggestions for potential guests, please do hit us up because we take them seriously and we are open to inviting these guests on the show. He's a very experienced jiu-jitsu practitioner starting back in 1994. He is a Special Forces Army guy. He's set up the Army Combatives program and individual combat behaviours training for the Australian Defence Force. He's a highly experienced martial artist and he's a third-degree black belt in Brazilian Jiu Jitsu. He is Paul Cale. Thanks for joining us, Paul.
You're welcome. Thanks for having me.
Welcome to the Roll or Die podcast, Paul. It's awesome to have you on. I know a few people who have actually trained with you, so Craig Donaldson from Integrity, Lockie as well. So I actually messaged Lockie today and I said, hey, we've got Paul coming on the podcast, and Lockie was like super, super excited about it. And the first thing that he did was he sent me his Survive the 5. So can you tell us and tell the audience what your Survive the 5 is, mate? Just real quick before we go deep back into the rest of your martial arts stuff.
Yeah, so Survive for 5 was one of the tests that we had, which for our instructor cadre. The idea of it was that you fight 5 people in a row for 1 minute, and the goal is to survive the encounter. So wherever you finish in that, you have 1 minute bout each. And wherever you finish in that bout, the next person starts. So if they're in a dominant position, wherever they are, they start, but they're fresh and off they go again. So you start become very tactical in how you play this variation of the game. So in other words, as we're playing, if I can be on top of you and think my way through it and get into a better position, the next person comes into a position where I can either neutralize their newfound power and what have you. And then I progress my position again. And I'm just methodically dealing with this power and fitness that I can't keep up with. No matter how strong or fit I am, I can't keep up with it because it's a fresh person each time. If someone submits me, my minute starts again. And if I submit them, I get to have a rest for the rest of that minute and I start on top. So it's kind of just it's just grind through it, but you start to realize that if you just like jiu-jitsu, when we learn how to fight one-on-one, if you're not tactical about it, you don't think about how you're going to survive this and get through it, then you're not going to achieve it. So it's just one of those tests. We've got maybe better versions now. So the big thing was to be able to put students who are not experienced under physical stress, which then simulates combat stress, and that's done through raising heart rate and breath rate, which damages cognitive ability, right? And that's why jiu-jitsu has become famous, because it's about controlling a situation so that you can think through and problem solve, which is very unusual for close combat. So, so what we do now is we'll put people maybe like you're sprinting on a rower for 400 meters, and then your oppo who's supporting you is doing 800. You go in and you get into a technique position, and then your oppo comes in to assist, but you're both under duress, but you've got to demonstrate the technique perfectly. And that means you've got to calm your breath rate, do your box breathing, all that sort of stuff as you're doing the technique. And the thinking behind this is that with very little exposure to the martial art training, just to put 2 people together, you get two, especially SF guys who, 2 alpha males that want to prove how powerhouse they are, but they got no idea how to fight hand to hand. They end up just destroying each other. So we've got to get a way to get that stress and that same sort of physical response without the injury rate. So it's always working through different ways to achieve this. Yeah. So that's just one of those ways of doing that.
And in that SF world where you are teaching these guys these sorts of things, how quickly can you get them up to speed with something like that, Paul? How quickly can you put them into a pressure test like that? and then have them sort of, okay, really quickly self-regulate their breathing, stay safe, get to a dominant spot? Like, how quickly, for somebody with like very little jiu-jitsu or grappling experience now with your kinetic stuff, how quickly is that happening?
It happens quickly because with the question you had about the SF guys, they already learn how to deal with combat stress. So through their shooting and their room combat and so forth. So what I'm doing is I link all of the close hand-to-hand stuff to shooting. So the thing that soldiers do the most of is room combat, shooting, trench warfare, close combat, jungle, whatever. And the idea is to actually link in strategies, tactics, procedures that are very similar to the shooting packages and aid in the same way as a shooting package. So the best way when you look at the Army Combatives program is it looks more like a game of rugby union than a wrestling match. It's like you'll see two people come in and hit someone. You'll see three people, one pulling security, two doing a thing. So the way to deal with the lack of time to develop people uh, unarmed skill sets is to put a blade in your hand and to outnumber your opponent. So even if we're outnumbered by the enemy, the way we fight is still in these little bricks and these groups, and we now deliberately do our unarmed fighting in pairs and in threes. So you because I could be fighting someone that from a country that culturally they all wrestle. They're a world champion grappling thing. So to try and think you're going to beat that. The other thing is, of course, we want to use a firearm and work the gun in a battlefield. But at close quarters, your weapon gets suppressed. You have stoppages. You have people. You're in trenches. You're on top of each other. So then it's that whole, okay, well, we're a rugby team, and then what are the best techniques to take from martial arts, and then work them together. And in jiu-jitsu, you might get position, and then you're looking at submission. Well, we've got both happening. I've got someone hitting the position of full human body, and then a full human body breaking the limb. So they're working in unison just to quickly destroy you, and regardless of your skill and experience.
Was it martial arts or the military that you started off first?
Martial arts. So I started
Yeah.
martial arts in 1979.
What was that? What martial
That
art was that
was
you started with?
I started with Taekwondo. So back
Yeah.
back in those days, there was just clubs, and you didn't have the. If you had a martial art club in your town, that was great. It wasn't like, oh, I'm going to check out jiu-jitsu or check out this. It was like, what's in town? And if it's taekwondo or karate or judo, but you're normally traveling to a different town to get to the different martial art. But I did that too because once I got my black belt, which was in 1984 in taekwondo, I took up judo and I took up karate. And then that's when I started sort of cross training, not deliberately. It was just because all martial arts schools just train twice a week, and I just like doing martial arts. So I thought, well, I'll go down the road, and oh, that's judo. Okay, great. So it's not. So I just did it like that. I did it by accident. Someone said to me, "Oh, you started cross training in the '80s." That's, it's just by accident. But it came in handy later as time went on. Mm.
And what about jiu-jitsu? How did you discover that?
Well, I started judo in '84. So when I came across jiu-jitsu, I'd already been doing judo for 10 years. And I watched the UFC, and UFC 1 and saw Hoist. And I just thought, well, I want to fight this sort of fighting, this cage fighting, which was frowned upon really in society, and it was illegal in a lot of states and so on. But people who were serious about fighting were attracted to it, and we just wanted to, this was something that allowed us to do our grappling and striking for those that had a bit of a mixed background. And then watching the Gracies do their piece, it was like, well, it looks like we need to know this Gracie Jiu-Jitsu. So I went to a Jiu-Jitsu seminar in '94 with Jean-Jacques Machado, who later on I would get my black belt from. And it was me just sort of turning up. I turned up thinking, well, I know about ground fighting. Don't tell me about ground fighting. I've got a bit of an idea. But the methodical, logical application of ground fighting that you find in jiu-jitsu, I didn't have an answer for it. And I just thought, well, this is amazing. And if I'm going to fight in a cage, I better learn how to do this jiu-jitsu. And that's how it started. Mm.
Did,
So
did you
it was
have
for
like
Vale Tudo.
watching?
Mm.
Yeah.
There
Did
was
you
no,
did you have that thing watching UFC, Paul? And like with the martial arts that you'd sort of been doing, where you're like, oh, the karate guy will win, or oh, the kickboxer will win. Like, did you sort of sit there and go, nobody will beat the guy who does judo? Like, did you have something like that watching like the first UFC? Do you remember those
yeah,
sort of
no,
thoughts,
I
or were you like,
remember.
I don't know?
No, well, probably a bit of all because I was young. Um, so I didn't have the maturity around my thinking that I do now. I didn't have the experience around it. I did have the experience of getting kicked in karate. So I ended up with Kyokushin karate. So again, that was the same thing. I'll turn up somewhere. And back in the 80s, like even point karate, if you look up point karate, people were still getting punched. It wasn't like you see today. And
Yeah,
Taekwondo was nothing like you see today. It was more like what you expect, like what Joe Rogan would talk about. We would
yeah,
kick the shit out of each other. And then when it became an Olympic sport, it just changed. It just turned into. That's why when people say BJJ for the Olympics, it's like, no,
yeah.
your martial arts dead once it goes to the Olympics.
Please,
And
please
then,
don't.
yeah, please don't do that. And then, yeah, so I knew that everything has its place, and it's just I was more interested in how people would deal with that. So, for instance, there was a Daidajuku fighter that I think Hoist fought, maybe UFC 3 or something. And I know Daidajuku, they do judo and kyokushin together. And I had a lot of exposure to that. And so I was interested about that because I thought they should do all right. It was more about knowing about the martial arts that were, and then when I didn't know the fighters, it's like, oh, well, they're not their best fighters. So it's always just like people watch, I guess, UFC now, have a bit of an idea about people's backgrounds. But yeah, it was more interesting back then to see how things would play out. And then it just got to a point where there was almost there would be a way of doing UFC. And then if someone started doing leg kicks, everyone's, whoa, you see one leg kick for a whole round, and it'd be, oh, that leg kick, that was cheeky. And now people are, jumping off the side of the cages and doing spinning kicks and what have you. It just
Yeah,
turns out whatever you want to do, you just need to do it live. You just need to train it. You just need to work out the escapes and how to counter that. And it's doesn't matter what technique you do, but it's got to be done live. So
So you'd started your jiu-jitsu and then you moved into the military. So then tell us about how things transitioned from there in terms of you setting up some of these programs that you're currently working on.
yep. So I joined the army originally in 1987, and I thought that there would be plenty of unarmed combat, but there wasn't. There was an unarmed combat course, and I ended up training with the person who ran that for the army, which was Major John Whip, and he was a judo instructor as well. But there was a death in boxing, so I used to box in the army. That was something that we could do. So, and then as time went on, there was a accident and a death with boxing. But back then, we didn't understand about concussion, and the individual who died actually had been concussed in training for that week. And then we found out
yeah,
he had played rugby the weekend before and was concussed. So he had multiple concussions. And just back then, we just didn't understand what that meant. And then the final concussion on the day was enough to have him die. And that banned all contact sports. So to this day, you're not punching each other in the army. You can wrestle, and that was a big thing to get that in, but you're still not punching each other. And that's basically goes back to that event and the solution to it, which is to stop contact. So I kind of always felt soldiers needed to have some skill sets. And as time went on, The military self-defense program kicked off. And then I got myself involved with that. And then coming from a Brazilian Jiu Jitsu background, some of their ground stuff was questionable. And there's a few things that was like, yeah, this could be cleaned up a little bit. So I started with that and the ground piece. And, the people involved knew who I was and so on. But I guess the big change was once I um, went to 4-hour commando and my first deployment, and then that fighting hand to hand with the Taliban on the battlefield and strangling a guy and so on. All that sort of led to the epiphany of, yeah, what I've been saying is correct. And then, well, how does that look? And then I sort of got the green light and just went to town and we started um, redeveloping the close quarter fighting package for special forces. And then when I got out in 2013, after my fifth tour, I did we created the infantry integrated combat package, and that sort of went for a while for the infantry, and then I got asked to come in and sort of spread that across the entire army through the Australian Army combatives program, and now New Zealand does it as well. So I've just got back from New Zealand, and they've been doing it for a few years now, but they're really starting to get stuck into their package as well. And like I said to you, what you asked before, it's what's unique about it and why it found a lot of traction in the US with US Special Forces and so on is the way that it's done as a gunfight. We teach it in that sort of context, and we fight in teams, and we've got the SF guys have got the dog in play with them and all these things. So it's beyond just that one-on-one. Let's go, and yeah, I think that's the bit that sort of caught the attention of people and made a lot of sense to soldiers.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense to me too, right? Like, if you're going up against one person, what's the best way to beat one person? Well, you beat one person with 5 people.
Yeah.
Like you sort of mentioned rugby before, and I'm from New Zealand, so rugby is obviously a big thing for me. And it's like, oh, if you've got more numbers, then you should be better than the opposition, sort of thing. So I think putting those sorts of things into play definitely makes sense. But having something now make sense and saying it out loud is fine. But how did you sort of start to develop that, Paul? Like, because, usually we just do what we see, right? So how did you sort of sit there and go, okay, let's put more numbers into this?
I think because of that cross training in the 80s, and it wasn't a thing, I always had to think through things myself. There wasn't someone saying, hey, here's how you cross your training. My instructor would be, why are you cross training?
Yeah.
Stop cross training.
Yeah.
Stop. It's not good for your martial arts. It was always a negative thing. So right from the get-go, I had to start thinking about how I would link techniques together and things like that. And then a real big key for that was that exposure to Gracie Jiu Jitsu and what they're doing. And then I realized, well, hang on, they're sort of faking their strikes because they're Jiu Jitsu guys. So how about we really strike well? And if someone doesn't like get hit and they want to grapple with me, well, guess what? I'll grapple with you as well. Like no problem. Let's do that. Like, how about I hit you, motivate you to grab me, and now let's grapple. Like, why do I have to be a bad striker because I'm a jiu-jitsu guy? Why do I have
Yeah.
to be a shit grappler because I'm a striker? And obviously now that's everyone's thought, oh, of course it's like that. But back then
Yeah.
it was a way of thinking. And I just think the same way with weaponry and everything else. Like, understanding the blade around jiu-jitsu, understanding multiple threats, all that sort of stuff. That's the jiu-jitsu I'm interested in, which to me feeds off the original intent of jiu-jitsu for Vale Tudo. And to me, it's just really going back to the roots of jiu-jitsu in Japan. When you look at the arts that sort of founded around the feudal eras and how that played out during the last shogunate and the Meiji Restoration and all that.
You, I've I normally do my homework before the podcast. I've been a bit slack today and haven't, but I've just realised that it says here that you hold a black belt in 8 different
Hey, yeah.
systems. So I
Mm.
think you might actually be one of our highest, most decorated guests that we've had on. Would you say, Brentos? I know we
Yeah.
get excited when someone has 2 or 3 black belts,
I
but
don't know. Yeah, look, Paul would probably know, but I don't know if there'd be anyone else in Australia with 8 black belts in martial arts. I don't think so, Paul.
I think there's a who knows, because there's so many people that will say they're lots of things.
Yeah,
I actually had
yeah,
someone say to me that they said, "Oh, you need to stop saying what you actually are because it doesn't sound real." And it's like, "Oh, great, good, that's excellent." You know, there's I feel that I've not wasted 45 years of my life. Like, how's it possible? I
yeah,
don't know, mate. You live for 45 years and do this, and you might find that you get a grade or two. It's not that big a deal, you know what I mean? It's like people say, hey, you know, a white belt's just the black belt never gave up. Well, guess what? Multiple black belts is just multiple styles that you didn't give up. So, you know, and they all bleed into each other. I think that's when the acceleration happened. When I started seeing the links between my jiu-jitsu and judo and through Kosen and then my links through Kyokushin and judo and then the Aiki jiu-jitsu and this and that, then it just started to just accelerate. And now people say, which you might ask me, what's your favorite? I None of them. They've all become one, if that makes sense. It's
yeah.
just what's my focus when I'm showing
Mm.
somebody, and they all have sort of. It's more about what the similarities are than the differences. And now
Yeah,
it's
I
it's
actually
the
didn't have a
mindset.
favorite. I didn't have a what's your favorite question, Paul. I actually had a, is there a martial art that you've done that you kind of considered that was a waste of time?
You know, yeah. At the time, there's probably been a couple. And but what I did is when I found another art. So how I came about, you know, before the internet and so on. The way I went to a different style of karate, for instance, is if I trained with someone and they kicked the shit out of me. I was like, okay,
Yep,
I need to go to your dojo because I need
yep,
to know that that's not just you being a great fighter. How about I go to your dojo? And then if everyone kicks the shit out of me, it's like, okay, I need to learn this. And that's what I
yep,
did. So Kyokushin, for instance, I didn't know what leg kicks were until the first time the Kyokushin guy started kicking the shit out of my legs. And it's
yeah,
like, what the hell is this magic you called leg kicks? Now, you know, obviously there was Thai and everything else, but we didn't know. You know, the exposure is just so much more limited, you know, 3 TV channels and not much interest
yep.
in martial arts and magazines and stuff, you know. Um, and you know VHS videos of anything that you could grab a hold of. So you know, I get the shit kicked out of my legs, and I go right. I'm learning Kyokushin, and then I think, well, I want to fight. So who's the Australian champion? Sam Greco. I better go meet him and spar with him, and then go. "Oh, I'm not fighting this guy. I need to learn from this guy." So then I became his student, and it's just always same as the jiu-jitsu. As soon as someone shows me that there's something I need to investigate here to understand, and then I do it. But I don't get caught up in. I don't drink the Kool-Aid. I have great respect for what I'm learning, and the heritage behind it. But it's always okay. How does this help me better understand combat? Not
Mm.
you know, yay, this is the thing. So I just cruise along and keep an open mind to the next thing that answers some questions for me or not.
Yeah, I mean, you're also very much a student of martial arts, and in some ways, like a historian of martial arts too, right? Like,
Mm.
I've listened to you speak, I've listened to some other podcasts and YouTube clips and that sort of thing that you've done. Like, your martial arts history is also very, very good. So the depth of knowledge you have in and around these things are amazing, Paul.
Yeah, I'm being very lucky. I went to Japan in '91 for my first trip, and I lived there and trained and at the Yoshinkan and trained with Gozo Shioda, who was a 10th dan in Aikido, which is the thing that everyone loves to hate. But his best friend was Kimura, and
Wow.
which Jiu-Jitsu names after. And then they him and Oyama Sensei all went to university together. And, and then you start realizing they all know each other. There's all these different sort of takes on things. And then as far as the Aikido goes, I have three different lineages that I've been involved with, and none of them being the Aikikai, which most people know Aikido for. But they're all lineages that they've come with high judo credentials. And that was pre-World War II, where you had to turn up as an experienced martial artist before you're allowed to be take on the training. So it looks different, like you don't have to ask about, judo techniques or jiu-jitsu techniques or karate, because the students knew that, and they just wanted to understand the concepts and principles of what was being taught. But when it comes to things like Aikido, I think people want me to say, "Oh, I'd say Aikido," but the concept of Aiki is almost similar to Jiu in Jiu-Jitsu, but it has, to me, it has more elements that are workable in a concept of fighting. So I've met some really good fighters who say that they use that Aiki concept. They don't do the Aikido techniques that you see. I mean, I don't do the Aikido techniques that a lot of people see, but Aiki in itself is a very handy concept, and it's handy for day-to-day life as well. But
Can you give us that concept, Paul?
well, it's to match a force or use energy. So you could say something to me, and instead of me saying, "Well, stuff you," I can think about, well, how can I get that energy and return it to you in a way that, you could say, well, you know, uh, it's not being in conflict with you. It's like Jew. So basically, I want to bend with it, but the idea of Aiki is not just bend with it and use it against you. It's also add some force to it. So it's return as well. But I want to match your force. And the good thing about that's a use of force continuum right there. You're like, well, you're a piece of shit. Well, I appreciate your honesty, mate, and I'm doing IT to you now. It's like I'm not taking on that. I'm just, oh, mate, I appreciate your honesty, and I'm sorry that you feel I'm a piece of shit. I actually think you're a great guy, and hopefully we can work that out later on. Now, I could sit back and go, mate, if I see you, I'm going to cave your head in. But
Yeah.
that's it's much more powerful
It's
but
very disarming, right?
it's disarming, and I'm matching the energy you're giving me. You're saying words, and I'm coming back with words. Right.
Yeah.
And to me, jiu-jitsu is very much like that. You throw punches, I grab you, hit the ground, get into a strong control position. I can talk to you and say, mate, seriously, come on. Again, I've just matched the fact that you're now physical. I'm being physical, but I don't want to harm you. Now, that's the whole IT thing, but it only works at the highest tier of a fighter. Only an expert fighter can not harm someone. If we're training young kids in combat, they're learning how to kill the enemy. They're not learning how to, capture and this and that. They don't have the expertise or experience. And the whole idea of Aikido is that the goal is to have an expertise and skill level that does allow you to capture. But that means you have to be a great martial artist, and that means you have to understand all martial arts. And it's when you drink your own Kool-Aid, and every martial art's at risk of this, um, that you start to go into decline and not see it. You don't see it because you're just too busy looking in the mirror as opposed to what's happening around you. And I think it's a big risk for jiu-jitsu, because jiu-jitsu is kind of born as the internet was born. So the pickup was so quick because of the internet, but I also think that the climb will be just as fast because of the internet. And already you can see things happening where, well, what are we doing getting catch is this and catch is that, and jiu-jitsu is not, and you can see it. It's always, and it's just mostly young people just trying to find a different angle so they can make their money, as opposed to really all martial arts have always had sort of an interplay and a relationship with each other. And that's what I love showing. I love doing the jiu-jitsu seminar and showing people the variety of jiu-jitsu, especially, when you look at the stuff that's come out of the original stuff out of Japan or out of judo. And it's interesting when, like you say, you talked about lineage. like Mochizuki Sensei, his teacher, he was a Uchideshi of Mifune. And you know that old black and white footage jiu-jitsu people look at a lot of judo, or that old guy, the 10th dan, that's Mifune, right? So he's considered one of the best 10th dans of judo. And he was a direct student of Jigoro Kano. So what's that?
Mm.
2 degrees of separation. And then you've got Tamiki Sensei, who was also sent. So I did that with John Gay, who was 7th dan, direct student with him. And he was the other judoka sent by Kano to bring back Aiki. And then you got the Goshin Jitsu no Kata. That's all Aiki techniques used for self-defense, married with the Kodokan Judo techniques and things like that. So, it's all there. But I think what's good for Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu is it promoted Jiu-Jitsu where Judo wasn't strong. And countries where Judo's strong, it really doesn't get a foothold because obviously where Judo's strong, being an Olympic sport and being so explosive and great to watch, it's hard for Jiu-Jitsu to break into that.
Yeah.
But for countries like Australia and that where the Judo wasn't so strong in that, it in the US, it gained roots, and I think it's probably helping judo now as more jiu-jitsu people want to explore their jiu-jitsu because they really are like Brazilian jiu-jitsu's birth is from Kodokan judo. Like it's Mieda sensei and all of that. It was all Kodokan judo. So what I love about what the Gracies did with it was that they didn't just rely on, hey, we're only doing jujitsu against jujitsu. We can do jujitsu against karate, against all these different styles. That's what they did with it. That was amazing. But now it's sort of like gone heavy the other way, where we're not just doing a type of jujitsu, we're doing multiple styles. So what you can see in jujitsu now, if it was Japan, there would be clear styles, like the Mendez brothers is a style. What John Danaher does is a style. What the Gracies were doing is a style. They're all distinct styles. And if we're in Japan, they'd be known as Kyokushin-ryu, Daito-ryu, all these things. But we call it all jiu-jitsu. We blend it all together, but there's a huge amount of different styles and concepts and strategies around the game based on the school.
What are your thoughts around modern day Brazilian Jiu Jitsu? Like, how do you sort of touched on it a bit? Do you feel that Jiu Jitsu is in a decline to where it was when perhaps you started or when it first took off?
I think there's plenty of people doing jiu-jitsu, but I think it. I think jiu-jitsu has an identity crisis. I think it's hard to put your finger on what jiu-jitsu is. It's such a broad term now. It's almost like Krav Maga. Like people use that instead of saying self-defense. It doesn't even need to be Krav. It just, oh, I'm doing Krav. What's that mean? Self-defense. It's jiu-jitsu is almost if you touch someone, start grappling, you're doing jiu-jitsu. It could be. So it's an interesting one. But I was talking to a friend of mine about this who has the same sort of time in doing Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, and we said the same things. It's better to see people rolling and doing stuff, but you can definitely tell a school that is not training to fight. They train to play the game, and they think it's fighting, but you can see that they don't have oh, that killer instinct. It's more like a very good chess player who's physically playing chess with you, and yeah, I want to dominate you, but if it got physical, it's different. You can see that they don't have that same. Yeah, I don't know. You see the same thing where you see schools that have a very strong fighting culture, where they're predominantly MMA type people, as opposed to no fighting culture, and they're just about everyone doing their bit. I still think it's good that people do martial arts. So I don't want to, when you see how few people do martial arts with the population, I don't think it's helpful to get stuck into one over the other. I try to draw people to martial arts. And if you're doing a martial art that's not really taking with you, well, welcome to martial arts. And there's a bunch of variety. Let's go have a look around and get yourself involved because the positives that come for kids and things like that is fantastic. So, I think jiu-jitsu is great for people. Is it and then it's up to me to do the jiu-jitsu that I think is important. And so for me, I mostly do a lot of seminars and just show people other elements of jiu-jitsu just to open their mind up to its history and the richness of techniques. And then I show them how to apply that in competition, because obviously kids really caught up with competition. But for the older crowd, it's just the fun of, doing some different things. And then,
Mate, you've led
yeah,
into my next question perfectly, right?
okay.
So, a 10-year-old kid and a 45-year-old person, what martial art would you sort of direct them towards?
Well, still, I think it comes down to what are they interested in and who's the instructor. So again, I would not just say, hey, there's a jiu-jitsu school down the road. I would go and have a look. Simple
Yeah.
as that. And I wouldn't say, hey, there's a karate school down the road or anything else. And just like there's different styles, like if you went to like I said before, let's say a Mendez school, as even the style of jiu-jitsu's got to agree with you. So you will go to a school that sort of does a style that suits you. Well, it's the same as karate, and it's the same as all these other martial arts. They have sort of styles around them as well. So check them out, and go from there. I've only had little hands-on with other countries such as Thailand, Filipinos, Koreans, who else? Cambodians. So there's a few there that I've touched on, but mostly Japanese. And
Yeah.
Brazilian Jiu Jitsu, I absolutely appreciate what the Gracies did, because they showed position and how to better position. So they gave me a common sense around grappling that I thought was very good, that it made sense. Um, but I would say you have to find an art that suits your personality, of that kid and that 45-year-old, and check out the instructor. So always, when people ask me that, I always find out who's around. And I know a lot of people, so I try to, hey, do you know this guy? And hey, he came from this, and he's a good guy. And I just go, yeah, go here. Mm.
On your Kinetic Fighting website, it says here that you worked also with Olympic combat sports teams, as well as like cycling and water polo,
Mm.
and use some of your sort of stuff with that. Can you tell us a bit about that?
Yeah, well, a lot of that was about mindset, and the cycling. The girls were doing a selection process, the female team. They don't have enough as much money flowing as the male team, and so on. There's a lot of sports that are like that. So they took the selection process very seriously. They were sort of competing for a smaller amount of money. And so they were very serious about the girls who got into that team. They couldn't afford to be not knowing their mindset and stuff like that. So they did a very serious selection process, and I was caught up in that. And for me, it was mostly about mindset. It's the same as if I talk to footy teams, but I talked to the national basketball team, the water polo, and then we did some grappling underwater, because there's a lot that goes on underwater with water polo. You'd be surprised.
Yeah.
It's a brutal sport. And
It
then
is, yeah.
yeah, and then oh, who else did I talk to? There's a bunch of teams, but once I started, I just got invited to more and more. So when I first got out of the army, I went to the Australian Institute of Sport. I got asked to go there and help start the Olympic Combat Sports Centre, and it was about the combat sports that were in the Olympics. But whilst we were doing that, we just got exposure to a lot of other teams and a lot of other stuff, and they knew about my special forces background, so they wanted to feed off that. And yeah, and I do it now, even with football teams. I spoke to the Reds up here in Queensland, and another team, and I just talked to them about mindset, communication, things, like winning. A lot of people think that if you're winning, you're celebrating, and if you lose, you learn. Well, that's not the case. Win or lose, you need to look at the mistakes you made, that your game plan. Like, the other guy might have just lost. You didn't win, they just lost. So did you do your best? Like, did you, like, um, what were the problems. So just get away from the win-loss piece and get down to professionalism and perfecting what you're doing. And a lot of times, even when you're losing, it might be, well, hang on, did you meet the objectives that we had laid out for you? Did you achieve this and force this, which is to start that process to make you a, capable fighter down the track where you will start winning, as opposed to just looking for quick sort of give me victories. So just things like that. And at that level of competition, that's where it's at. There is no give me competition. At elite national level, everything's a hard fight. So yeah,
Yep.
so that's what that was about.
Your special forces training. So first off, to get into special forces, it takes a specific type of person. And I don't think you can just categorize a person. Like, I don't think on day one you're like, these guys will get in and these guys won't. It was my understanding.
Yeah, that's
What
true.
what do you kind of feel sets somebody apart, Paul? Like there is no test apart from the test that you're going through and see who is there at the end, right? But what do you really feel that sets a special forces person apart? And then once you've done that and now you're in those roles, coming out the other side, you've obviously done bloody well for yourself and you've set yourself up really well. But what are the pitfalls of having that special forces mindset and coming out with nothing else at the other side?
Okay. Well, to start with, you're looking for character traits in people. So you're doing things to bring out the person's character. And a lot of people will hide, like why people learn how to fight or why people are bullies or why they're hiding something that's some sort of in their background, and it's comes out in their character or the way they display their character. But once you put people under great duress, you start to, whatever your true character is, you start to sort of show. So it's really about finding that. It's like when you see incredibly fit people, it's okay, we're going to keep going until I can find that point, that breaking point where you can do 1,000 push-ups, or let's do 2,000. I want to know who you are when you can't do the push-ups and you have to keep doing them. I want to
Yeah,
know who you are when you're cold and miserable and you had a gutful. Oh, good, we're going to stay out. You thought we're going? No, we're staying. Like, who are you? And that's really what that comes down to. So there's a real structure around that. I've simplified it, but we have all
yeah,
these character traits, and all of the directing staff are constantly assessing against these character traits. And then there's physical tests that you have to meet certain limits, and you have to be able to achieve certain amount of navigation points over X amount of days, and so on and so on. And it's done, like it's an individual selection. It's not. There's a lot of there's some units that do it all together. You watch Navy SEALs all together and their boat crew, and you can do it, but there's still, no matter how bad it is, when someone's next to you and you can sort of you're in the same boat, literally, you can sort of feed off that. Oh, he's still going, I'm going. Whereas when you're on your own, there's nothing to measure against, and you don't get feedback. So no one's saying, hey, you're doing great. No one's saying, hey, you're shit. They're just saying, here's your next thing, see you later. And you're just like, how am I going? So, you just got to do the best you can. And then you realize, a bit like that survive for five. Well, not the best you can today, the best you can for the whole time you're out here. Because if you go nuts and do the best you can today, you're not doing nothing tomorrow. And then you'll see people not be able to balance that, not be able to get that right, and go hard here. But you think, oh, they're doing really great. Next day they've pulled off, they've resigned, they're out. It's just too much. And then it's like, I can't keep doing this. And then other people, it's like, well, I need to do great, but I need to pace myself. I need to be here at the end of weeks, not the end of the day, and just stuff like that. So it's a real mind game, and yeah, you get through it, and if you're selected, it's like, hey, here you are, and do this, and obviously working on the other side of it. I've got to be directing staff on a fair few selection courses. Then you just start seeing the formula and what you go through to make it happen. And it's an important thing, because you're doing things where if you're in that job, like both of you, I rely on you not to kill yourself and not to kill anyone around you. So you're gonna fast rope off a helicopter, and the asylum stick at night starts waving around. That means that it's not on the ground, and you're a 20-story building over Sydney doing counter-terrorism training. Well, you need to stop sliding down that rope until it gets back onto the building. And the next person going down needs to be aware that you've stopped. And you need to do that without yelling at each other. You need to do it because you're under the wash of the healer. You just need to work together at a high sense of what's required to keep everyone alive and to get this job done. And that's in real time. And I think the hardest thing about leaving all that, what you're saying, is to have such a responsibility for your own life and other people's lives, and then come back to the world of nanny state, fucking hang on to the rails as you go down to and just want to belt your head in a wall. Yeah, that one.
Yeah.
That's the hard one.
It's
That makes sense.
it's what you were saying there. It just it made me sort of see the similarities perhaps with special forces and Brazilian Jiu Jitsu, because I always feel like there's such a huge drop off with people that start Brazilian Jiu Jitsu. Like, what is it? It's 0.1% of the people that start it will actually get all the way through to black belt, or whatever it is, whatever that percentage is. It perhaps is a similarity with special forces, with the number of
Yeah,
people that start off and then that actually make it through to the end.
yeah, and I would say the only difference is that you get feedback as you do your jujitsu. But if you think of the jujitsu as after you've done selection, so maybe let's say blue belt was your selection, and then that continuation to get to your black belt, you know.
Yeah.
But sort of once you got through that, pretty much everyone gets through to the end. There are people that do drop off and not make it through some of those courses that are required, for very good reasons, you know. But overall, everyone gets through, and then it's the beginning. You know, your green beret or your sandy beret, depending what, whether you're commandos or SAS or whatever. It's the beginning, and it's where you get to start. Like black belt is meant to be showdown. It's the beginning level of your journey, and off you go, kick off, and it's good. And yeah, so you're right about the BJJ, and that's also, I think, that bit that worries me is that then the belt becomes something that's wanted. It's become something that's seen to be worthwhile. So if you're saying 1% of people get through, then if I'm a bit of a businessman, then how do I get another percentage through? And we have 2%, and I get that 1% of the 2%, and
Yeah.
then that's your decline. That's where, and it's a hard one because BJJ, people can grade at second degree to black belt. So there's not really a governing standard that's making sure. We just hope that, everyone competes to try and generate a standard. But I think it's probably going to be an Achilles heel in the future. It definitely was a strength for jiu-jitsu in getting it spreading, but it might be a bit of an Achilles heel moving forward when we start getting undesirable, starting doing silly things that they did to karate and everything else. And BJJ won't be protected from that. It will be a victim of that, just like other martial arts were, because it's just human nature.
Yeah.
So it's something we
Yeah.
just have to be aware of,
Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah.
I think that'll be interesting with the UFC BJJ component coming out now, like
Mhm.
how that plays out, to a bigger audience, and then, what rule sets they start to put in. And, like, I think anytime we're doing those types of, made for TV programs, I suppose that's also part of that, or could be part of that watering down system as well, right?
Yeah, and also you're going to make something super popular that is a rule set. That rule
Mm.
set will become what people focus on, and they'll go, well, this is the only style that works because look at us dominate that rule set. Not
Yeah.
understanding, well, mate, you haven't got multiple threats. You don't have, and all that. It's you know. But if I was allowed to bite you and poke your eyes out,
Yeah.
all that garbage, and I get it, but there's an element of it where, yeah, but if I'm ganging up on you, or we've got weapons, which is very common. As long as you understand your objective, and the bit that gets me with some young people is just the blinkers of, yeah, you can be really good at a sport, but don't let the confines of the sport let you think that that's the world. Like let it be something that informs other things you do.
Yeah, fantastic. Well, that's probably a really nice place to
Mate,
finish up.
perfect.
Thank you
No
again
worries.
for giving up your time. So, as I said at the before we press record, we have got a little bit of a pop quiz for you here that
No, right.
Brentos likes to do. So, no
I've added a
fear.
couple too. Just as we talk, I've added a couple. All right, mate. We'll make these pretty quick, Paul. You're a busy man. Don't want to take up too much of your time. You've been awesome with your time, mate. So, iPhone or Samsung?
No, I have an iPhone. I'm not happy
Strength
about
or
it, but all my stuff's on it. I tried switching,
strength or
it's too painful.
flexibility?
Well, strength, but now it's flexibility.
As we get a bit older.
Mm.
Pasta or rice?
Oh, it's so good. Rice,
Steak or chicken?
steak, chicken's great, but
Can you
steak.
drive? Best book you've read?
Tycho,
Yeah. Yeah.
leading
Excellent
it.
book.
And I'm hoping that's the next season of Shogun. I hope it's Tycho as a leading,
That would
a
be cool.
prequel.
Yeah.
It would
Yeah.
be
That would be
fantastic.
very, very cool. Yep. That
Yeah.
would be very cool. But yeah, that's a good recommendation, actually. These two questions will define you as a man.
Oh,
These could be a
great.
problem.
Mm.
One of them I don't think is,
You're going to hurt my DID.
can
Who
you
should
drive a
I give
manual
you?
car?
Yes. Very
And do you
well.
wear Crocs?
No.
Oh, he's a
Yeah,
genius, this man. That is why we
Perfect.
love him. He's passed. This is
Thank you.
yeah,
perfect.
yeah. Did you have any
Thanks.
doubt? Come on, as if,
Oh,
as
mate,
if.
I
Yeah,
knew straight away.
yeah,
Paul, can you just give us a 1 minute, 60 second, or take as long as you want, to be honest. How can people find you? Where can we book you for workshops and seminars? And just kind of spruik what you're doing a little bit, mate.
I'd say the best way is I've only got a couple of platforms, but all of them are busy. So I'd say direct message me through LinkedIn, and it's just Paul Cale Official, or through not LinkedIn, not LinkedIn, Instagram, Instagram or Facebook. Just direct message me, and then just leave it
Yeah.
there because I'll get around to it. But I get so many messages from around the world, and it's a huge amount, and I really do try and answer them. So, and I'll just jump in, and if people want a seminar, I'll come along and do a seminar, no problem. But that's probably the best way. I've had other ways, but I just haven't been able to manage more than 3 platforms. It's just too much. I
yeah.
like to do my zazen as well. You see, meditate in the corner.
We understand. We also have a few platforms going. So yeah, thank
Yeah,
you, as Brentos said, for giving up your time. You are a super busy man, and that was awesome. That was a really great podcast. I'm pretty sure our listeners will love it. Brentos, did you want to do the wrap up?
Yeah, let's do a quick one. We've taken up enough of Paul's time. Thank you for
no
tuning in
problem.
to another episode of Roll or Die. Keep training. Remember, it's not about the belt. It is about the journey, as Paul has kind of mentioned a few times. Big shout out to Athletic Body Care for keeping us fresh on and off the mats. We appreciate you guys. Subscribe to the Roll or Die podcast on Spotify, on Podcast Republic, and anywhere else you get your podcasts, and also YouTube. If you've got 5 minutes, create another account and subscribe on that one as well. You're allowed to do that. There's no problems. That's it. We'll leave it there. Our merchandise, we've still got a few t-shirts, so jump on and grab those. Until then, though, guys, we will see you on another episode of Roll or Die. We'll catch you next week. Again, Paul, thank you so much, mate. Awesome guest. There's a lot of good stuff in here, mate. So appreciate you coming on. Thanks very much.
No
Thank
worries, a
you.
pleasure.